Hi, okay. So we're here at Vardia, the Turkish pavilion in the Venice Biennale. Um, this is our the sixth uh, shift for the Turkish pavilion. It's Neverland. We're basically working on digital fabrication. Um, I don't know if you guys can see. We're in the back. We have a robot arm and a sandbox. I don't know if you can see.
No, not really.
No, not really. Um, so we're here with Chintan and Jason, and so I'm just gonna do a quick introduction of your bios, and then I'll leave it to you for a quick presentation, and then we'll move on to a discussion, a question and answer kind of the format. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Great. So Chintan is a filmmaker and photographer with a background in architecture and urbanism. After years of working on corporate architecture and urbanism projects with very little benefit to society, she felt an overwhelming started making films to communicate some of the important issues that we are facing as a society. Over the past few years, she has been involved in a variety of projects with NGOs, as well as her own personal work reflecting her design background and concerns around agriculture and the environment. Her training as an architect has helped her not only to understand many of the issues communities face, but also how to document and communicate them in an engaging way. After 10 years of working as a photographer and filmmaker in what is fashionably known as development, Jason had finally come to the realization that much of what he was involved in was little more than managed poverty. He started to realize that he was becoming a part of the system and began to understand that it is an industry like any other. He began to question the work he was doing and the absolute disconnect between those who commissioned him and those he was there to document. As a result, he made a shift and founded the Source Project with Chintan. Together, they make films and create meaningful media that are all about telling stories from people who are not driven by anything more than compassion. So please, welcoming Chintan Gohil and Jason Taylor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I think we'll start off with the fact that I started working in England, and I started as a photographer, and I started wanting to do meaningful, in-depth photography and stories that were positive and, as I say, driven by compassion. And I found that not many people wanted it. It didn't sell many newspapers, and by the time you got paid, you were in debt and had to find the next job. Which is why I went and moved over to India, because I could kind of live on a beach for next to nothing and go off and choose what I wanted to do and how long, it took me. So if I wanted to, one of the projects I worked with was on the Dongria Khond, which was an indigenous community in the east of India, who were being persecuted by a mining company that was British based. And, there's very little funding for it. So I just took my motorbike over there, rented a little house and lived there for next to nothing for 6-8 months, and photographed. And it cost me my time, and that was it. I didn't have the overheads. I didn't have a mortgage. I didn't have a family. I didn't have, a BMW M3 to pay the HP on. I just had petrol to put in my old Enfield and, some rice and dal to buy. So it enabled me to really focus on the issue and kind of develop meaningful stories and photographs, which then went to various newspapers in England. The Survival International took it up as a campaign, and lots of other organisations as well. And since then, all my work has been donated, because I can afford to donate it to organisations so they can keep fighting the struggle against these mining giants. And that's when I met Chintan when I was over there. And she was frustrated with working within the corporate sector.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I was born and brought up in India and then trained as an architect and went to the Netherlands and did a degree in urbanism. And then I came to London, and because of my background, I kind of wanted to work on issues that concern society. And I thought that by learning urbanism, I would be able to work on those issues. But then I started working with this company that won the bid for Olympics 2012, and then from a small post office shed and a very different kind of working environment, we moved to this massive corporate office, and the size of the staff, it kind of became 4 times bigger, and it was just a different working environment. And all the projects that came, apart from the Olympics, which was also one big question for me in terms of how the whole project was handled and how the people who were supposed to benefit from Lee Valley, which was one of the poorest areas in central London, actually those people were pushed out of there. But the whole project started, or London won, on the premises that those people from the valley would benefit, but they were actually moved out, and all the property prices rose, and it was just basically all about money. And also the office that I worked with, they were doing a lot of golf course development in the Middle East, so resource intensive golf courses basically in a place where there's no water and there's a real scarcity of resources. It made me really frustrated, and I tried to question it while staying in the organization, but it obviously wasn't welcomed, and I felt like I wasn't welcome. I was not part of that system, and I couldn't be, and I couldn't progress, and I felt really frustrated. And I just one day called a friend of mine who I knew that he was working on something that had some meaning. And I called him, he was in India, and I said, "Are you working on anything that would excite me?" And he said, "Yes." And so I just left my job and booked a flight to India and
met me.
yeah. No, so then I was working with this friend of mine promoting earth and architecture. But that was another story, because that kind of led to different kind of frustrations, because we were working with the Indian government to promote earthen architecture, which is kind of, still more than 70% of architecture in rural India. 70% of buildings are built with natural materials, and they are built with kind of the local artisans. But there's this thing in India where everybody aspires to be, kind of, I can't say middle class, but they aspire to have, one of the aspirations is to have a pakka house. Pakka means a concrete and brick house. It doesn't matter whether it's really badly built. And so it was quite frustrating on so many levels, where to explain to people what, that it's about quality and it's about durability, but in a different sense. If you build a bad brick and concrete house, it's not going to last. But actually, an earthen house that you can repair by yourself or within the local area with the local artisans is much more durable. And at the same time, we were working with the government engineers who didn't understand this concept of durability as well. So it was a different kind of frustrating working environment, where we finally managed to finish the project, but that kind of left me really questioning about where I wanted to go with my work. And also, at the same time, I started getting really interested in food and agriculture and climate change, and how it was affecting us. And food was one of the kind of key issues that we're going to face in future. And I met Jason, and he wanted to start the Source project, looking especially at food and at green revolution in India, which is kind of the start of industrial agriculture that changed the whole agriculture system in India. And so, yeah, he started this project.
Fair enough.
Great. I mean, do you want to maybe talk about what you're doing now, what your work is, what specifically you're focusing on now, maybe how you're incorporating, maybe for you, Chintan, I guess you're a trained architect, maybe how you're incorporating that knowledge into what you're doing now and how you two are going about your design processes and everything.
Well, everything's kind of changed because we had a child in India. So we left India because we had no kind of control over what he drank and what he ate and what he breathed in. So we kind of thought we'd give him a bit of a start, and so we relocated back to the UK. We've kind of been quite busy with him, and Chintan's been looking after him while I've been trying to sort of reconnect with people, communities, organizations over here. Yeah, it's everything changes. I mean, nothing's changed in
nothing in terms of
politics.
how we feel about these issues, but I think it's just our context has changed quite a bit.
Well, we can't just go off and spend 3 months in a community and film and document stuff. Now it's changed, and also because of our government and immigration practices, we've got to have like 75,000 euros in the bank every 2 years to prove to the government that Chintan is not going to diminish the British economy by sucking it dry through NHS and social service. I mean, it's ridiculous. We own our own house. I can earn 60, 70,000 a year, but they're not interested in what I earn or what we own. They only are interested in how much liquid assets we have. So we're kind of trying to struggle through that at the moment, after years and years of, I've been on the road for 20 years. So it's like all of a sudden staying in one place and having a house has been strange. But at the same time, it's been really good because I've linked up with the Soil Association. So what we're trying to do is to continue, what I charge myself out at per day is still a fraction of what most other people charge themselves out with. And what I'm specifically focusing on is making good quality video and social media available to organizations that can't necessarily afford it. So, and not just that, but through years of experience, being able to do consultancy. So I've just been to Uganda and shot 7 films on bees in Uganda, telling little stories about people within communities and how they're working with bees and how those bees are benefiting through increased yields, the ability for them. I did a story on a poacher who's now using bees to stop the elephants coming through the forest and stealing his crops because he was killing elephants. And they're just these really lovely little stories. But, most organizations couldn't afford someone like me because people like me charge £1,000 a day. And I charge anything from nothing. I did a film a while ago and we got paid in beans because the company didn't have any money, but they sold beans. So I said, just pay me in beans. So we just got boxes of beans. So, but it's kind of, and I just kind of feel that's the way that we should work. And I've just been, in Uganda, I shot a film for a farmer who's trying to create organic mint. He's trying to find international markets. So I shot a film, I edited a film, and I've sent it to him, and I've sent it to the Welsh government, and they're publicising it. And I'm trying to find links for him to help him and using the film as a tool to educate people about what he's doing to try and get him access to different markets in the UK. And I just kind of feel that, we all kind of have a responsibility, and, we earn enough to have our own flat and a car and to eat good food, and I just kind of feel that we live in an environment where we're just too greedy. We just want more and more and more, and we are the problem. That's the problem. I speak to so many people who are complaining about the state of the world, and it's like, well, what are you doing about it apart from doing a thumbs up on Facebook to ecological genocide? I mean, how can you put a thumbs up to someone posting a story on ecological genocide? I mean, it's like, it's just, or no, it's called ecocide, isn't it? Not economic. But yeah, I just find it really frustrating, and I just think that more people should be focusing their efforts on, to try and empower organizations that are trying to do something that has some sort of benefits. I mean, there's a lot of bullshit out there with the development sector. As I said, it's an industry, but also out there, hundreds of thousands of small grassroots organizations doing amazing work. And if you can take some money from one organization and use that to subsidize something to help someone else, then, I think it's a really good way to work. It feels really positive. It feels really positive. I'm surrounded by really good people, and I'm trying to help them, and they're trying to help us. And it's like, we can't hear anything. We can't.
I think.
No, we were just commenting.
Yeah.
We were just commenting on somehow the roles that you've played before meeting each other, and what are the common points that you then find after working together, especially being with an architect and a filmmaker, which it seems at first sight that might be two different grounds. But we were wondering, what are the common points that you find, or the common skills that have been that had resulted useful from an architect and to the filmmaking process?
I don't think it's so much different in terms of, I don't know, because architecture is also a very, or part of it is a very visual part. It's also about aesthetics, and it's also about composition and structure and telling story in a way. So for me I had never really, I'd done some photography when I was studying architecture, and actually developed my own prints and stuff, but it wasn't so intensive, and I never actually filmed anything before I met Jason. I was interested. When I met him, I talked about an idea for a film, but I'd never made a film, but I really wanted to make a film, and I had no idea. And I kind of thought that it was a very, very elaborate process, because I thought I needed a lot of crew, and I couldn't do it on my own, and I needed a lot of equipment. And the filmmaking that I solely learned from Jason is all about kind of having very minimal. I mean, all our gear actually fits in a backpack that's that size, really. And I just learned that way of filmmaking, and that it's because of the modern day technology, it is possible. But also filming, because Jason started as a photographer, he has a very specific way of filming, and a lot of it is kind of a lot of my shots until we got the slightly thing. We've done a lot of a lot of our kind of shots are actually still, they are like a photo composition, and yeah, it's about light and composition, and then whatever movement happens, that happens within the frame itself, rather than kind of moving the camera and doing a lot of zooming and that kind of filming. And I think that training as an architect with that aesthetic and the eye for those visuals, that really, yeah, it was not difficult. I can say that. I mean, the first film I made on my own won actually quite a big award. So yeah, but it was because I think that it just came naturally to me because of my training in architecture.
And also, I used to before I was a photographer, I was a carpenter, I was a welder, I worked in construction, deconstruction, ripping up houses, putting houses back together again, then a landscape gardener, and then a photographer, and now a filmmaker. So there's been a, there's been a bit in architecture there, but not like Chintan. But also, I think it's not just about the practices either. It's just, it's also about the emotions that are involved as well as the there's this corporatization of everything, and the fact that whatever sector you work in, the only way that you can make a living is if it's a really profitable sector. And Chintan's frustrations with working in architecture and finding you have to sell out to large companies that that just move within the corporate structures of whatever it happens to be. And the same with me. I just feel disillusioned. You're just another photographer. And in India, I started working for like Time magazine and the Telegraph, and and it's what every photographer aspired to. But it was all about egos. It was like everyone would meet at the Delhi Press Club and get stoned and get pissed and talk about how they got the front page of Time magazine, or how they were going to fly out to Afghanistan to do something, or and working with Time, it was just champagne, 5-star hotels, private aeroplanes to take one photograph of someone that was caught up in the tsunami they wanted a story on. And I was just thinking, these are thousands and thousands of dollars of resources being used to take a photograph of some poor person. And the way that they dealt with him and the way that they spoke to him was so disrespectful. And I just thought, I just can't do this. I just really can't do it. And I won't do it. I refuse to do it. I've never worked for any of these organizations, particularly people like the Gates Foundation, which I find quite repulsive. But they pay a lot of photographers a lot of money, the filmmakers a lot of money. I could be on 20, 30 times what I'm on at the moment. But I don't want to.
So I guess I'll open up the floor to the other students that are here for our shift, to any questions that they might have for you guys, whether it be about your work or anything, really. Yeah. Can you turn the-
Hello,
Sorry.
Jason and Chintan. My name is Randy. I'm from Indonesia actually. I'm looking at your website, this the sourceimage.com.
Yeah.
It's really I really appreciate it. It's full with very beautiful pictures and movies based on these 4 categories. Can I say this? Land rights, agriculture, biodiversity, and human rights. I mean, it's very. I mean, I'm really in touch with this kind of thing. Like even you said, like you could have been like 30 times more rich by being like the usual the commercial photographer, but you choose like this. Makes me remember when I was doing one trip in my country to one island called Papua. I presume you know it. It's this city in the middle of nowhere that we have to reach it by small airplanes, and the airport is like a remote airport that only serve airplane because even the car couldn't reach the area. And then I was living in one small monastery in this church, and it's owned by the German girl. He made a school there. I mean, even us as an Indonesian, we don't do anything for this community. And then one girl from German, she built a school for all the community in this remote city in the middle of the forest. this kind of story also reminds me a lot about your story. I think you are fascinated with this culture and this the climate change and everything. I actually want to. I'm curious. Like, you're a photographer and movie makers, and you have to in touch with this kind of community in the, in how can I say? You have to in touch with this kind of communities in different part of the world, which is so different with your. It's so different with your. I mean, you can. Did you get it?
Yes.
How can you deal
Yes.
actually with this kind of community every time you have to work to make a movie or make some pictures? Because I don't know. Yeah, that's how I'm curious how your approach as a movie maker and a photographer. Well, that's my question for Jason, but my question for Chintan. I really appreciate you were from the architect's background and now you moved to another passion. But I like to ask you, are you kind of following the Indian architecture nowadays? I mean, you know that this year Balkrishna Doshi, the Indian architect, won the Pritzker Prize for architecture. I mean, do you think he also respecting the Indian culture, or maybe he's more into the West? Yeah, well, that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll get my answer over. So the thing is that when I mean, the last few years I've been all over the place: Indonesia, Mongolia. I've just been California, Kenya, Uganda, obviously India, El Salvador, all sorts of places. And the thing is that all these cultures, when you strip them down to the basics, they're all exactly the same, and they're just human beings, and you connect to them in that way, and you treat them as you would anyone else. You just treat people with respect, and you talk to them. You get good people, you get bad people, you get liars, you get honest people, and you always work with organizations on the ground who are there to as an interpreter, but also the local community know them and trust them. And the thing that I would say the most important thing is actually understanding what's actually going on. And I think that's the problem with a lot of filmmakers, is that filmmakers are either so pressured that they're just literally jumping from one job to the next, desperately trying to get jobs. And they basically pitch for a job and they don't really know what they're talking about. But what they do is they just pitch as they would for anything else. So you have people who are one day working for Chevron, making a film on their sustainability record in the Niger Delta, and the next minute they're working for Greenpeace, and the next minute they're working for KFC, making a video on how tasty chicken wings are. And the thing is that they're just constantly there to make money. That's what they want to do, or that's what they need to do to get by. So whereas I feel that we should be specializing in understanding things. And I find the situation that I go out, and particularly in Kenya, I've just been working in the Mau forest with the Ojek community, who have won this landmark legal case in Tanzania to get the rights to be recognized as indigenous people, but also to have a right to take their land back. And when I went out there, it was the same story. They just don't take you seriously. They just see you as a filmmaker. And it was only when we actually sat down and started talking, and I started expressing my opinions on commons, land rights, on trade, on globalization, on corporate plutocracy, human rights, and so on, that they actually started to understand that I actually knew what I was talking about. And we, and eventually we sat down and we had a really, really good conversation. And it just really helps, because, before you land, you already know what you're going to do. You actually know the situation. And I think it helps as well, understanding social media and how I'm doing a lot of social media stuff at the moment, and you know, sort of for Instagram and playing around with that, and also trying to create multimedia for these small organizations. But you know, we're all the same. We all need water and air and, you know, food and peace and communities, and just to be able to get on with our lives. And unfortunately, you know, most of the world, people don't. Yeah.
It also, I think, just kind of spending a lot more time than a lot of other photographers would have in a place.
Yeah, yeah. It helps you to understand. You know, when I go out on these big trips, if I'm paid for 5 days, I'll stay out there for 10 days. So I'll double the amount of time that I'm out there. And in that time, you know, I'll just give you a quick example. I did a job in El Salvador for Friends of the Earth, and it was about climate change. And they asked me specifically to go out to look at flooding in the lower Lempa Valley. So I went out there and I spent a couple of days with the community, went out to a bar, had a few drinks, and started talking to people. And it looked a really straightforward story to do. But all of a sudden, someone started talking about a dam, and I started asking questions. And within 3 days, I discovered that an American Millennium Development Corporation was carving a road through the mountains, cutting down the forest. The rainfall was running down the hill. There was no catchment for it. It was going straight into this massive dam that was owned by Spanish Energy Corporation. When it got to flooding, they just opened the floodgates and flooded the valley without telling the people, because the policy of the American government was to remove the people off the land so it could be used for biofuel. And it was only because I kind of understood about these things. I understood about the politics of the region. I understood about the environmental impacts of climate change that I was actually able to understand. And I actually refused to make the film because I said that it was a lie. And then they sent me somewhere else, and that was also a lie. And in the end, I made them 3 films all about ecology. And they were happy because they didn't want to be an organization that were making films about things that didn't basically exist. Anyway,
So,
you need to...
Yeah, so you asked me, I know, so Doshi, Balkrishna Doshi, he was the founder of the architecture school where I studied, and of course he was very much influenced by modernism, and he worked with Corbusier. And when we were studying, and kind of before that, for the 30 years, we were all kind of very much about aspiring to be making architecture that resembled that modernist architecture or Western architecture. And Indian architecture, in that time, we really studied it as a subject, and it was all about kind of like Dravidian architecture and all the history of Indian architecture, but not really. There was not so much of kind of contemporary Indian architecture. There was obviously a way of, how do you say, a way of designing that was very Indian, because I think the process of design that is, I think it is very cultural to me, and it comes from, it is influenced by so much that we see around us, and so much of our, you know, our lifestyles that are still, I mean, now the world is so much more connected, and I think it's all blending a bit. But in that time, there was still that very specific Indian way, but all the buildings kind of designed by architects wanted to look pretty modern. Now, I think it's shifting, it's kind of turning around a bit, where India and some of the contemporary Indian architects are recognizing that importance of that Indian essence in architecture, and taking a lot of influences from what is Indian, rather than just looking to the West for that inspiration. So I don't know whether that answers, but I have to say, I have to be very honest that I don't follow so much of architecture at the moment. But yes, of course, I know the news about Doshi, and I have a lot of friends who have kind of become a little famous architects in India. So I do know a little bit.
Well, thanks a lot for the very complete explanation. I'm just curious about that actually. And yeah, thank you.
Do you have any more questions?
Hi, Jason. Hi, Chintan. Thank you very much for reaching out to us. This is Orkun, and I first of all want to thank you for inspiring us, our students and me, for your persistence on the good. I think that is something that we don't always keep in our minds, and I have to say I feel a little bit guilty of not doing that, but that's probably a good thing. That's you're with us today. You said you don't really follow architecture so much recently, but most likely you've seen more, observed more than we did in many parts of the world. So, and as you also noted that architecture is contributing to this eco-genocide or whatever you're calling it a lot, much likely more than any other industry. I mean, construction, what I mean is about architecture. I know that there isn't a straightforward answer, but how are we going to, what is the way of changing the way we build a little bit? You know, I don't mean entirely, but especially in our developed countries, we have like so-called initiatives and you know, all these like LEED and Minergy or whatever they're called, certificates, but they don't really help somehow. They don't seem to be helping so much. So what is your take on that, or do you have a take on that?
Can I just, I mean, I'm not obviously an architect and know nothing about it, but my observation of that is that basically nothing's going to change until everything changes. And what I mean by that is that, you know, our mindset, everything is connected. And it's about, you know, it's about consumption, the consumption of energy, the consumption of resources, natural resources, and this endless quest to become richer and more powerful, and until that something massive happens, nothing's going to change. I mean, it's just, you know, it's cyclical. It's just constantly throughout history we've done it again and again and again, and we will destroy ourselves. We will destroy ourselves, and everywhere that you go. I mean, in India, you've got, you know, these incredible adobe houses that come from the ground, but you know, that doesn't benefit anyone other than the person who's built the house and the local artisans. And it's the same with agriculture. All these organizations are saying that they're there to help farmers. They're not there to help farmers at all. I mean, it's a total and utter lie. And one of my frustrations is that more people aren't talking about this. You know, we go out and we buy our food. I went to a supermarket the other day to do some filming because they do organic food. They do one packet of carrots for 85 pence, you know, for like €1. And that's basically it. And they're calling themselves a store that supply or stock organic food. And people were just walking down the aisles, just piling crap into their trolleys. Not just crap, but also just not wanting to know where it comes from, whether their avocados come from Peru or Spain, or whether, you know, they just have no interest. It's just food. They're only interested in how much it is and whether they have enough money to be able to go out and go on their holiday to Spain or wherever it happens to be, or buy their latest, you know, mobile phone. So until we all change what we're doing and how we interact and how we buy things and what we're conscious of. I just said to Chintan today, you know, we need to buy a blender, and Chintan said, I'll look on Amazon. And I said to her, well, I'm not going to buy anything from Amazon anymore now. I'm done with it. You know, I'll find other small companies that are online, because, you know, Amazon have just doubled their profits in the UK and halved their tax, and they literally were paying no tax. And now they're paying, I mean, it's getting to the point where the British government, the taxpayer, will have to pay Amazon to exist. Whilst, you know, and Apple have just, you know, become the first $1 trillion company to be traded on the stock market. I mean, it's, you know, it's completely out of control. And I'm not suggesting that, you know, we're going to change the world, but at some point in your life, you have to kind of, you know, say enough is enough. I mean, it's, you know, it's no big deal. It's not like, you know, we're going to starve or anything by not buying from Amazon, but it's just the way that we're slowly trying to change and understand the way, you know, that things are taking place, and you know, you just do your small bit, and that's kind of all you can do. It's like that African activist, I can't remember her name now because I'm dyslexic and I forget everyone's names, but and she had this whole thing, and it's about the hummingbird, and it's basically okay, what was her name? Banga Imatai. And she talks about the hummingbird and going back and forth, taking drops of water from a lake and dropping them onto a forest fire, and all the other animals laughing at her and saying, you're going to have no effect on the forest fire. And the hummingbird just turns around and says, well, I'm doing the best that I can. And I think that's all we can do. You know, there are some people who are in extraordinary positions of power that could be doing incredible things. And I and Chintan as filmmakers and photographers, you know, can only do what we can do, but at least we're doing something. And, you know, I know that my life was changed by a few individuals that I spoke to, and I know that I've changed a few individuals' lives, and all you can hope is it multiplies. And you know, the only thing that could save us is critical mass, and, you know, people finally starting to realize that change needs to be brought about. And if we want to destroy these companies, we have the power to. You know, we only have to stop buying from Amazon for 3 weeks and the company goes under. Well, in fact, 1 hour and they probably go under. So, you know, we've got to realize that you know, we don't live in a political democracy anymore. We live in a consumer democracy, and we vote by what we buy. If you buy Coke but don't like, you know, deforestation, or to say McDonald's and you don't like deforestation, or if you buy products with palm oil and you don't like deforestation, stop buying palm oil. Don't buy palm oil and then start bitching about how forests in Indonesia are being destroyed, and isn't it a shame, and then supporting the very companies, or banking with people like HSBC. I met a professor who was head of deforestation at, I don't know, Sussex University, and we stayed the night at her house, and in the morning, you know, some letters from HSBC came through, and I said to her, I hope you're joking, you don't have a bank account with them. And she said, I've got a bank account and a mortgage with them. And I said, they are possibly the most environmentally destructive banking group in the world, bar none. They are deforesting the whole of Indonesia. And there you are, lecturing to students about how they can stop deforestation, and you're giving them your money. I mean, it's like, I just don't understand. I really don't understand it. The level of stupidity in people who are supposedly so intelligent. I mean, she's probably got like 3, you know, she's got her master's, and, you know, she's probably got a variety of degrees and traveled and lectured around the world and stuff. And I you know, to me, it's common sense. And as Deb says, you know, common sense isn't very common, unfortunately. Anyway, that's my little rant. For what it's worth.
Oh, well, great. Thank you. I mean, does anyone have any more questions? Okay. Well, Chintan and Jason, thank you so much for having this discussion with us. And really, it's been kind of amazing and eye-opening also just talking with you. So thank you very much.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. I hope you have a nice afternoon. Is it afternoon? We're in London. Yeah, it's afternoon. Yeah. Okay, great.
Thank you, and take care.
Yeah, good night. Yeah, good night.
And that.
We didn't get that.
We didn't get that.
I said thank you. Thank you.
Great. Bye.
Okay. Take care. Okay.